What's up guys, how you all doing? Welcome to another video. So today we're talking about how you take your sports photography from being an amateur or enthusiast and how you move towards being a pro sports photographer. Well, today I've got 10 tips and 10 things that I think will help you move from one place to the other if that's what you are trying to do. Even if you're not, maybe these 10 tips will just make you a better all-round photographer. Who knows? But either way, I think you'll find it interesting. Before we get into it, do me a favor, do all the usual YouTube stuff. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, notifications, comment something below. Yep, I think that's pretty much all of it because it helps me out on my channel and I really appreciate it. Right, let's get straight into this. So, number one, what is the first thing that you can do to help yourself move from an amateur photographer to a pro? Well, the first thing might sound quite simple, but it is practice. And I mean practice. If you want to be a professional sports photographer, you got to do a lot of practice. Get out there and shoot whatever sports you can. It might be local league, it might be kid stuff, it might be your family members, your friends. I guarantee you there is always something that you can shoot. Probably within a couple of miles of most of you guys watching this video, there is some kind of sports taking place. All you got to do is get in touch with the right people, see if you can go along. Understand to start with that might literally be a local football team in the park, but if that gives you the practice, then that's what you should be shooting. Get out there and practice. Okay, moving into tip number 2, and that is to get some critiques on those photos you take. And I don't necessarily mean like professional critiques. I'm not talking about getting in touch with sports photographers or me or anyone like that. It can be anybody. It can be your friends, your family. You can critique yourself. You can watch videos of people like myself who talk about tips on how to get good sports photos and then use those tips to look at your own photos and critique yourself, because critiquing your own images and getting other people to critique your photos, that's going to help you improve. That moves nicely into tip number 3, and that's to get your images out there on whatever type of platform you might have. The easiest way to do that for most of you is going to be social media, something like Instagram. I have a couple of different Instagram pages. I have my main Rob Sambles one, that's kind of me, but then I also have Rob Sambles Sport, where I post my sports photos. That's a great place for me to create an easy platform where people can see sports photos. Do that for yourselves, post them on your own Instagram, your Facebook, your Twitter, whatever it might be, but get your photos out there, because the more you get your photos out there, the more people become aware of your work, the more people can see your work and critique it. Get your photos out there by whatever means you can. That moves into step number 4, or tip number 4, and that is to give yourself a professional presence online. The easiest way to do that alongside your social medias is to create yourself a website. Now, it's not that hard to create a website. I have my own website. I do mine through Squarespace. This video is not sponsored by Squarespace, but if you do want to check out Squarespace, if you look at the link in my description, you can get yourself 10% off or a trial or something like that through the link. It's not sponsored, but if that link helps you guys out, then by all means go and use it. And if you want to consider Squarespace for your own website, then great. That's what I've done with mine. But there are other companies that are good too. I used to have my website with Zenfolio, whatever you like, but a website gives you a professional presence. Straight away, it presents you in a professional way. And that's why I think a website is important if you genuinely want to move towards being a professional. Okay, tip number 5. So we're starting to practice, we're critiquing our images, we're getting our images out there. Well, the next thing I'm going to say is you have to hold yourself accountable and you have to act on the learning and the critiques that you get. Now, I often find myself getting frustrated with people about this. You know, I make videos with a few kind of simple tips and people might get in touch with me and say, hey, what do you think of my images? And I end up going back to them and saying, well, hey, look, it's great that you said you watched a lot of my videos, but the images you're asking me to look at, they're not straight. There's no ball in the picture, and they go against all the simple tips that I try to share with everybody. And those things aren't hard to act on. So genuinely, hand on heart, I think I moved myself to a stage where I had straight images, something like probably a week into my sports photography, because I learned and I looked online and I watched other people's videos and blog posts, and it became apparent to me pretty quick that having straight images was an important thing. So from that point on, I tried to shoot straight images, and if I didn't manage to, then I would straighten them in post. So from that point on, probably 7 days into me shooting sports, I learned straight images, and that's what I did from that point on. And you have to try and do that, right? If you don't act on your learning, you're not going to get better. You have to hold yourself accountable for making your images better in that way. Okay, so we're learning, we're posting our photos, we've got our website. The next thing to do is going to be to build a portfolio. All that practice, all those photos, you need to get together probably your sort of 8 to 10 best photos. And I mean your absolute best. You have to be ruthless with this, and I've talked about being ruthless with yourself in previous videos. Your 10 absolute best photos, so that when you go to someone and you say, this is my portfolio, those 10 images are the best of the best. They represent your best possible work. And if you don't look at a photo and think, you know what, that is some of my best possible work, then that photo should not be in your portfolio. So the next step, the next tip is to build that portfolio, 8 to 10 of your best possible images. Okay, from this point, we're moving into some of the actual practical tips and some of the steps you have to take when you start trying to shoot as a professional. And the first thing is to accept, and this one's hard, but to accept that there will be a certain amount of gear that you are going to need to have. Now, I've been a big advocate on this channel. That does not mean you have to go straight out and spend £20,000 on all the latest cameras, the R3s, the 400mm f2.8s. You don't necessarily need that, but you have to accept there will be a certain amount of gear. I talk about it a lot on this channel, but for me, I would never say to anybody to go and shoot any kind of professional event, anything at all that you're being paid to do, without having at least 2 cameras. Turning up with just 1 camera to a professional paid job, for me, is just unprofessional. It's a disrespectful way to act in that role. Because what are you going to do if you do get unlucky and something goes wrong with that 1 camera that you've got? I've had it happen before. I've had cameras like malfunction in the rain and stuff like that, and it's not good. But when it happens, hey, you know what? It happened. I've still got my other camera that I can at least do the job with. Some people would disagree with me. I've seen people disagree in the comments when I've said this in the past. For me, those people honestly are foolish. I would not shoot a professional job without having at least 2 camera bodies. As far as your lenses go, they don't have to be the best of the best, but you most likely will have to accept, if you want to shoot pro sports, you're going to need at least a 300mm. You're probably going to need a 70 to 200. Probably you'd want that one to be f2.8, because otherwise you're struggling in anything other than kind of daylight. So whilst you don't need thousands of pounds worth of gear, you do need to accept the fact that there will be a certain amount of gear you're going to need to be able to do professional sports photography. Okay, from here, my 8th tip, and that's going to be kind of more of a practical tip again, but to really recommend, get yourself insurance. 2 reasons why. We just talked about growing the gear that you're going to have. I really recommend getting that gear insured. I've seen stories on Twitter and stuff of people who've had, you know, their 400mm lens break and then they don't have insurance. And I'm there reading it thinking, how have you gone out with a camera lens or a camera worth that much money and not had insurance for it? Insurance does not cost that much money. It's really worth having. Specifically related to being a professional, you can also get your public liability insurance, which is really important. For a lot of pro events, that's actually a compulsory thing you have to have, and if not, it covers you. Public liability insurance is really, really important. I get all of my insurance through Policy B. I'll put a link in the description for that one as well. If you want to go and do that, you can get like a discount when you sign up. Again, this video isn't sponsored by Policy B. That's just a link. It might help you guys out. So if you do want to go check out insurance with them, link in the description will save you a little bit of money. Again, there are other companies. I used to use PhotoGuard, but I moved to Policy B. For me, the policy just worked out a little bit better, and that's why I made the switch. Okay, moving to the 9th tip, and this one might sound quite simple, but it really is. If you want to be a professional photographer and you're at a level, you're an amateur who has done all that work, you've practiced, you've got a portfolio, and you feel like your work is good enough, well, you know what? The next step is just to charge people money. And by that I mean, Don't shoot for free. If you want to be a professional sports photographer, charge people money. Now, I am somebody who will say that sometimes there are reasons why you should work for free, or maybe why you might want to work for free. It could be something like a trial shift, or something where you're signing up to a new team and you might want to say, hey, you know what, look, yeah, let me come and shoot a game for you, see what you think. And chances are your images will be good and they'll like them. But then if they want to take you on board regularly, or like for a season, or hey, yeah, come and shoot all of our games, they're great. Yeah, no problem, but I'm going to charge you, and this is the fee that I'm going to charge. I see people make this mistake all the time. They'll carry on shooting for the same team game after game, and it's the exposure, and it gets me in for the practice. Well, hey, you know what? If you're shooting a professional sports team, they've got money, they've got some kind of a budget. Yeah, it might be tight, but they have some money. But if they want you to come and shoot their game professionally as a professional sports photographer, you need to charge them money. So if you don't have the confidence in yourself to say, hey, you know what, if you want me to do this, you got to pay me, well, then you will never be professional. It's a tough step for a lot of people to take, but it's a really, really important one. Now, my 10th tip for somebody who wants to be a professional sports photographer. And this one is a little bit controversial because you get a lot of the kind of old school guys who will strongly disagree with me on this. But hey, you know what? I don't care. My view is that you might have to accept that you might not be a full-time sports photographer. And by that I mean there are plenty of ways to do professional sports photography and still make lots of other money doing various other things. It might be that you do sports photography and other types of photography as well. I shoot all different things as part of my professional photography. I don't just do sports. I do events, I've done school events, I've done functions, I've done lots of different things. And that's just a common sense, sensible thing to do. Diversify your income a little bit. I also do non-photography work as well. I've really tried to actually diversify my income quite a bit. That includes things like YouTube, because it's just a sensible approach. And yes, some of the old school guys will say, you know what, if you don't make all of your money shooting sports, then you're not a professional sports photographer. Well, I think that's ridiculous. That's like saying an accountant who has a part-time job in a bar isn't a proper accountant. It just makes no sense to me. But hey, that's my advice. As you start to move into it, accept the fact that you might need to make your money from various different places. And you know what? If you're really successful and you take off and you manage to get yourself a full-time job shooting for a Premier League football team, then hey, fantastic. At that point, yeah, go and do that bit full-time. But you might not be able to get to that straight away, and it's important to accept that. Well, there you go. Those are my 10 tips, or 10 things that I think you need to do if you want to move from being an amateur sports photographer to a professional one. I feel like I've ranted a bit with some of those points, but you know what, some of those really ring true to me, and I really recommend you follow those steps wherever you can. If you guys did like this video, you found it useful, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Loads of other videos to come on the channel. In the meantime, guys, thank you very much for watching. I'm going to see you on the next video.